Well, good morning, Anchor.
Good morning. How's it going?
It is so good to see you this morning. If we haven't met yet, I'm John.
And my name is Jonathan.
So weird. Our names are not the same, but they are the same. I'm not a Jonathan. You're a Jonathan.
Correct. And you're not a Jon. You're a John.
It's true. So. It is a John the biblical way for those keeping score at home. And as I don't know when you're going to put this in, but you do a really cool thing where our names and our like job titles at the church come up on the screen somewhere. And yours looks different.
It does.
What does yours say now?
Yes, mine, that is a good question on what it says. It used to be our worship and production intern, but now, just this week, it is now going to be our video and tech director.
Look at that. So we can clap for that. That's fun.
Thank you so much.
No longer an intern.
Yeah.
Graduated early, actually. You were supposed to be an intern until August, and then you were doing so much cool stuff with the church, around the church, with the people of the church, that it just made sense to actually have that title be commensurate with what you do. And so we're grateful. Any of the cool stuff that you get to see online, a lot of the stuff that you don't see happen but just sounds good in the room at an Anchor Central or in the worship of what you're watching, a lot of that's directly a result from Jonathan. And so, as always, we can't introduce people and their jobs without also doing a plug. So, if you want to be on the live stream team, if you want to help with digital production, if you love spending hours figuring out tech problems to like audio and video equipment, Jonathan would love to hear from you.
Yeah, go ahead and email me at jonathan@anchortacoma.org, and I would love to get you plugged in. And even if you're just wanting, like if you don't know anything about tech or production or anything, but you want to learn, I would love to teach you. So shoot me an email and I would love to connect with you.
Yeah, and then we have a couple of events coming up that we're excited about.
Yeah.
The first is on the 6th in the evening, so it's this Sunday night in the evening. We're hosting something at our Anchor Central location on South Orchard Street called The Long Game. It's about marriage. Jonathan, you are interested in marriage recently.
Absolutely. So my fiance, her name is Cameron, and we just got engaged back in the end of December. We're getting married at the end of May. So this is something that we want to go to.
Yeah.
Not sure if we're allowed to, but
you are
okay.
allowed to go there. It's not just for married people. It's for anyone who is married, who has been married, who is planning to get married, who might get married someday. I also said, just as a fact of life, even if you're like, marriage is not for me, you're going to be around married people, and this will help you when they have dumb little fights. So this is going to be an awesome time where it actually is some serious content, though. We're hearing from some amazing counselors who are going to be on a panel and talk about what does it look like to have the long view in regards to marriage. And so we're excited for it. You and Cameron are excited for it. We're also excited for your wedding, whenever that is at the end of May.
End of May, yeah.
End of May. And then another event, there's a brewery meetup. Jonathan, what's the time on that? And what's the date on that? It's after this Sunday.
After this Sunday, so it's going to be on March 10th at 7 p.m. at Dystopian Brewery.
And it's not for you and I.
No, not for us. You're so right. But this is our women's event. So if you're a woman or you know some friends that are women in the Anchor community, go ahead and grab your friends and come to this event where you can grab all this community.
Yeah, it's going to be a ton of fun. Looking forward to hearing the stories and connections that come out of it.
Yeah.
And then we have something really exciting that we get to announce.
Drum roll.
It is so far down in the future. It is past your wedding, actually.
It is.
It is barely after school gets out. Anchor is doing our first ever Kids Camp. We're so excited. It's going to be June 27th to July 1st. It's going to be in the morning for about 3 hours during each of those days. You're not going to want to miss it. There's so much more fun stuff that we have planned that we're not going to share right now because we're building anticipation. But we didn't want you to miss out, so this is your official save the date, June 27th to July 1st. Any kid who's potty trained up through elementary school is welcome to be in there as a participant, as a camper, as it would. And anyone else, we would love to have you jump on our volunteer team for our kids camp. And so we're excited for that. Save the date. We're looking forward to that. But now we're gonna get into the gathering.
Yeah, we're going to be heading into worship, so do whatever you need to do to prepare your hearts.
And also do whatever you need to prepare the rest of your house. If you're like me and you have small kids at home, I know this is a great time for them to go watch the Anchor Kids lessons or something that's not an Anchor Kids lesson, but will keep them occupied on a device during this time of worship. Some of them might hang with you, and you know your family best. Our hope is this, so that you're able to prepare your heart for this time of worship, whether you're singing along, whether you're sitting and reflecting on whatever God's put on your heart this morning. We hope you enjoy the gathering, and we'll see you in a little bit.
Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. When everything around me is shaking, I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations, so why would He fail now? He won't, He won't. I've still got peace in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense, so I won't be going under. I'm not held by my own strength, 'cause I built my life on Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful in every season, so why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. He won't. No, 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 no. He won't. No, He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. When everything around me is shaking, I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations, so why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. He won't fail. No. My God is so near, He's drawn so close. Rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on You. I'm safe with You. I'm gonna make it through. Rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on You. Safe with You, I'm gonna make it. And rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on You. I'm safe with You, I'm gonna make it. song. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaking. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause he's never let me down. He's faithful generations, so why would he fail now? He won't, no, he won't fail, he won't fail, he won't. He won't, he won't fail, he won't fail, no, he won't.
In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. In the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born, then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not
thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope you enjoyed that time of worship, especially as we sang that last song together, recognizing and celebrating the person of Jesus and everything that Jesus is and what he means to us. We're in this season of Lent as a church, and during this time of Lent, I'm excited to dive deep into who Jesus is and what it means to follow the way of Jesus. We're so glad you're here this morning, though.
Yeah, so glad to see you. My name is Jonathan.
I'm John.
And in case you didn't see it in the countdown moment, we gave a little introduction to us, but we would also like to get to know you.
Yes.
So down in the description, you'll actually see a link to our connection card, and you'll see a little motion graphic to see what it looks like right here. But we would love to pray for you. We'd love to get you connected in ways to serve, all these different ways. So go ahead and check that out, and we would love to get to know you.
Also linked in any of the platforms that you're watching this gathering on is a link to our online giving page. We are so grateful for every single one of you who gives to the ministry of Anchor. When you give, you're allowing so many different things to happen. One thing that we got to see the generosity of Anchor in particular of the last week is we announced last week at our in-person gathering at Central that we were opening up a fund to help with mutual aid for Ukrainian refugees. There's a family that we're connected to as a church who's done events at the church before, who has a ton of friends and family in Ukraine that are trying to flee for their safety. And to see the generosity of the church come through and provide financial resources for so many of those families was incredible. When you give to Anchor, you're allowing it to be possible for us to say yes to requests like that when they come in. And so I just want to again say thank you to everyone who gives to the ministry of Anchor. And if you're interested in doing that today, again, there's a link in any of the platforms that you're viewing this on. Jonathan, we have a fun event coming up tonight, actually, at our Central location called The Long Game. What does that mean? What's the event about?
Yeah, so the event is talking about marriage. And it's not only if you're a married couple. We want to know if you are interested in marriage, if you know people that are married, pretty much for anybody that wants to know a little bit more about marriage. This event is going to go a little bit, dive a little bit deeper into that. So we would love to invite you into that. It's going to be on March 6th, which is tonight, at 5:30 p.m. here at Anchor Central.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to that. And like I said at the beginning of this time together, we're in a season of Lent. And as a church, this season of Lent, we decided to go through a series that we are calling The Prayers That Jesus Prayed. And so you'll notice that's the content of our teaching series, but also we have a devotional that you might have seen. There's an electronic version available on our website, and it's a devotional, one for every day through the season of Lent. It's been written by our staff, and we hope that it's useful for you and your family in this time of preparation as we get ready to go into Easter. And so I'm really excited for you to hear Pastor Bryan give the first teaching in this series, The Prayers that Jesus Prayed. You're not going to want to miss it. So grab something to take notes with, fill up that cup of coffee, and settle in to hear this great word from Pastor Bryan.
Father, I want those you have given me to be with me where I am.
Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors.
I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message.
This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Hey, Anchor community, Pastor Bryan here. We're starting a new teaching series this morning that's going to be taking us all through Lent, all the way to Easter. It's called The Prayers Jesus Prayed. I personally am excited about this teaching series because in this series, we're going to be looking at what did Jesus pray? Prayer is like an intimate thing where we get to see somebody's heart, their mind, their struggles, their questions on display before God. And so we're getting a front row seat on the prayer life of Jesus, and really an invitation to pray as he prayed, as we are his disciples. The idea of prayer, though, sometimes it can be, frankly, awkward or difficult to pray. I remember before I was a Jesus follower, I got invited to a youth group, and I just assumed that whatever, there were some girls that I would like hanging out with there, and my friend was cool that invited me, so I willingly went. And there, like about halfway through the youth group, we split up into groups, which now I'm familiar with, having been a pastor for a while and a follower of Jesus for longer. But then it felt confusing and weird, and fortunately I was sitting next to the friend who brought me. But we were in these groups and we were told to pray. Everybody was praying out loud. And when it got to me, I happened to be sitting next to this friend that was really cool, and this really pretty girl that I was very aware of that I was sitting next to her. And when it got to me, my time to pray, this weird bit of stuttering and stammering came out. I was not very familiar with praying in public, and this kind of paralysis of words and maybe not even words came out. On the way home, my friend said, "What was up with that prayer?" And I did not know how to respond. Prayer can be awkward and difficult sometimes. Sometimes, even if we're followers of Jesus, the idea of praying aloud can feel paralyzing. We have this sense that we have to get it right. We have to get it theologically correct. We have to maybe have a touch of poetry in the prayer. And maybe our tone has to feel really prayer-y, whatever that means. Prayer can sometimes be awkward and difficult. Sometimes even maybe not in public, but praying alone, whether it's our distracted, cluttered minds that we don't have the ability to kind of be connected to what our heart is really needing to pray, or we're distracted and busy with life, or sometimes we just are there and we know in our guts there's something we want to we know have this urgency to pray, but we don't really have the word. Sometimes prayer can feel awkward and difficult. Sometimes, it was as a pastor, in one season of me being a pastor, I went through a really difficult time personally with prayer, where I was oftentimes very comfortable being a person who prayed publicly, but my inner prayer life was, to be totally honest, depleted. I was doing a lot for God, but I wasn't spending much time with God. And so my prayer life, as that pattern went on for a series of months, became kind of, bipolar, where I was really good at presenting, but very not as good at really sharing my heart with God. That was a difficult season for me. Sometimes prayer can be awkward and difficult. But here's the interesting thing. Even though prayer can be awkward and difficult for anyone, whether you're a follower of Jesus or you don't know if you believe in God, even though prayer can be awkward and difficult for everyone, we still find ourselves doing it. Those of us who are followers of Jesus and those who wonder if we even believe in God, we still find ourselves doing it. The singer Sam Smith, in his song Prayer, writes this: "I'm young and I'm foolish. I've made bad decisions. I block out the news. I turn my back on religion. Don't have no degree. I'm somewhat naive. I've made it this far on my own. But lately that expletive ain't been getting me higher. I lift up my head and the world is on fire. There's dread in my heart and fear in my bones, and I just don't know what to say. Maybe I'll pray." Pray. Maybe I'll pray. I've never believed in you, but I'm going to pray. And I think this articulates many people we've either met, or maybe people we've been at certain points in our lives, or maybe us even now, that we don't know if we believe, but we still pray. Prayer can be awkward and difficult, but it still feels like our mother tongue, because in times of crisis, we always seem to find ourselves doing it. As the adage says, there are no atheists in foxholes. Prayer is something we go back to. It's something that is never far from us. So Jesus, at the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, he talks about prayer in his famous Sermon on the Mount. And beginning in verse 5, chapter 6, verse 5, he says, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues, on the street corners, to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. I have read this passage many times. I mean, it's my job. I'm a pastor. But even before, I was really like, I was in love with the Sermon on the Mount before I was a pastor. It just has this ethic of the way of Jesus, and I would return to it often. But not until studying for this teaching did these two words jump out: seen and heard. Seen and heard. Did you see them? Did you miss them? I'm going to read them again. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. And then jumping to verse 7. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. They think they'll be heard, seen and heard. These are universal needs to be seen and heard. Ask that counselor friend. There are innumerable articles on our common human need to be seen and heard. This is when my son says, "Dad, look at this thing I've drawn." What does he want? He wants to be seen and heard. When a wife puts on that dress that maybe she's not put on for a long time, what does she want to be experienced by her husband, to be seen and heard? When a husband shares what's been happening in his life, or a boyfriend shares what's been happening in his life and the stresses he may feel, or if it's a girlfriend or a wife, she might feel, what does she want? To be seen and heard. Sometimes Candace will grab my arm if we're walking around downtown, maybe on a date or something like that, and I'll flex my muscles, because she needs to see the total capacity of my strength, not just the diminished form of my strength, but the total capacity of my strength. What's going on there? I want to be seen and heard. I want to feel valued and loved and affirmed. And here's the thing: many of us wrestle with this in different ways. Some of us, when it comes to feeling seen and heard, are starved. We're desiring it. I remember it being, as a youth pastor, walking into the lunchroom and seeing the loudest kids. What do they want? Why are they so loud? Were they born annoying? Probably not. No, they're starved to be seen and heard. And some of us are drunk on being seen and heard. We can't get enough of it. We, addictively check our social media to see how seen we're feeling, and we're consumed by this desire to be seen and heard. We're either starved on it or drunk on it, and some of us oscillate between the two. Well, it's interesting because Jesus is tapping into this universal need in describing prayer. He says, when you pray, or he says, the Pharisees, they pray in such a way. Why? Because they want to be seen by others. They are drunk on acclaim, and they're drunk on affirmation. They're drunk on being cheered on. And so they're constantly putting themselves in places where they can get more because they're addicted to being seen by others. And that's why Jesus says, if that's the reason they're praying, they've already got their reward in full. If they're really just praying for this horizontal affirmation from society that props up their power and perpetuates this religious system of elite people being celebrated by people that aren't elite, if that's what they're wanting, they've already got their reward because they're already in the position of power. But then he says there's another reward: being seen by the Father. He says in verse 6, when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Interesting. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Jesus is not recommending that we all have a prayer closet, though that might be good and certainly has been done. What he's saying is you could you could lock the doors and be nobody could see you and God sees you. To those that are drunk on wanting to be seen, that Jesus presents this picture that is interesting and different from what the world would offer. He says, your Father sees you. He sees what you need. He sees you. Even if you hide yourself, he'll still see you. And then to the pagans, those that are apart from the covenant of Israel, those that are not in the family of God, that worship idols and temples, and they clearly know these idols are made by man's hands, but are still trying to tap into the divine. They know there's a God, but they're trying to figure it all out. Jesus says they keep on babbling, thinking if they say the right words, if they hack the prayer code, finally God will listen. But Jesus says, do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. He's not saying we should go on without prayer because God already knows what we need. No, he's saying the level of God knowing us, the level of God hearing us. He hears the prayers before we speak them. This is powerful for those of us who feel starved on a need to be seen and heard, for those of us who feel drunk on the need to be seen and heard. Jesus offers the way forward. Your Father in heaven sees you. He hears you. This is the personal heart of prayer. Chapter 6, verse 9 says, this then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. The personal heart of prayer. Why is this the personal heart of prayer? One, because there's the person we pray to is named Father. And we're told to say our Father, not Father, conceptual Father, but we're given this relationship with Father that Jesus says, our Father, which is so important for us to understand, even though we really kind of have gotten accustomed to this. What I want us to do is to briefly become unaccustomed to calling God our Father so we can appreciate the idea of calling God our Father. And here's how I want us to do this. Imagine yourself in Israel over the millennia before the New Testament was composed, before Jesus was born in a manger, and recognize that though Israel had a passionate, sometimes frustrated relationship with God, the term Father was never used in a personal capacity with one's prayers. Even in all of the Psalms, there is never a prayer like, my Father. Sometimes the word Father is ascribed to God through analogy. God is like a father, sometimes the prophets will say, insofar as he does this. And sometimes the word Father is described as God is the Father of Israel, as Israel is his family, and God is the Father, but never in the way that Jesus uses it here. My Father, your Father, our Father. Jesus invites us to a type of personal and intimate prayer and connection and experience of God that is not a philosophical concept of God, and not God as a cosmic Santa, and not God as the sergeant in the sky, but God as Father. This is picked up by Paul, another writer in the New Testament, in his letter to the Galatians, where he says, because you are his sons, God sent his Spirit, or the Spirit of his Son, into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are his child, God has made you also an heir. It's important to note that there's this relationship of the Trinity in here. The Father, that we cry out, Father, because of the Spirit inside of us, right? That Jesus is giving us an invitation to experience by what he's done, his ministry, life, death, resurrection. So what I want us to savor is the fact that in our world, it's just starved and drunk on being seen, we have a God who sees and knows us. He knows us in secret. He knows us and hears us when things are unsaid. He sees and he knows you. And this is really the best avenue for us to start understanding Jesus's approach to prayer. Jesus's approach to prayer is connection over perfection, because the object of our prayer, the focus of our prayer is the Father. Connection over perfection. Perfection prayers often usually lead to paralysis. This is like, I don't know what to say. People are watching me. This is freaky. What if I say something that's not 100% theologically correct? Will I be chastised? I don't want to be chastised, so I'm just not going to pray. Jesus is connection over perfection. I love the way one writer said it's prayer should be the longest run-on sentence of your life. This kind of like, God, I need you, ... that you pick up later in your day. Yes, of course, we want set times for prayer, and some of us need, like, got it on my calendar, 30 minutes here, but it also should have this connection over perfection element to it. I remember one time when I was in a really fatigued spiritual spot, and I was also speaking at a youth conference, I found myself on my knees, totally tired and spiritually wiped out in this little room that I was staying in, and I didn't have words. I couldn't, for some reason, I just didn't have the words to pray. And I felt there in that moment of spiritual exhaustion in this small little room, all by myself, the Father say to me, by the power of the Spirit, Bryan, I don't need your words. This is this connection over perfection type of prayer. That we have this level of intimacy where the Father sees and knows us. And it's also intimacy over privacy. We're invited to share what's happening in our thoughts, in our hearts, in our weeks, in our relationships with God, with like the level of bearing our soul that we would maybe feel uncomfortable with, even with some of the closest people in our life. Intimacy over privacy. We are to not keep something from God because God knows everything already. So because he sees and knows us. So we are to bear everything within our souls to God because he knows it already and he cares for us. And also it's what I would call power over performance. If we have a performance approach to prayer, then it really has no connection to a real healthy relationship. People that have performance relationships with each other usually are frightened around each other. But power is what Jesus invites us to by his Spirit, and in this type of prayer with the personal nature of calling God Father. There is something I believe, and I've experienced this personally, when we get to actually experience God as Father, there's this power that comes out of that. Think about a young boy or girl that knows on like a subconscious level that she is so deeply loved by her dad, by her mom, by her dad, by her parents. And as she walks into school, this place where she might get teased or mocked or forgotten or get a bad grade on a test, she knows on a subconscious level that she or he is loved by her parents. He can walk through that life of school, that day of school, with this confidence that keeps them from crumbling. The same is true when we know on an experiential level God is Father. There's a power there. It's not the crippling performance of like, I got to do it right, but it's this power that is marked by this deep, deep knowledge that we're loved. I love the lines of this hymn, and maybe you know this, but I've got a river of life flowing out of me, makes the lame to walk and the blind to see, opens prison doors, sets the captives free. I've got a river of life flowing out of me. This is the kind of thing that happens when we know that we have a Father in heaven that loves us, not just as a concept, but as an experience that really is brought home by the power of the Spirit as an invitation from Jesus and gives us the freedom to call upon God as Father. This is what I would love for you to feel personally invited to experience, maybe for the first time today. At our in-person gatherings, we're going to be inviting people to pray at our prayer stations that they might experience this on a heart level. So to have the freedom that Jesus has when he prays to the Father, this is what his disciples, this is their right. As Paul says, we are heirs because of what the Spirit has done in us and helping us to understand that God is Father. But he's also holy, right? I mean, this is where he says, holy be your name, or hallowed be your name. So which means that he's not subject to the folly of earthly fathers. All of us experience imperfect fathers, and some of us know it more than others because of the relationships we have with our fathers or the history we had with our fathers. So one of the works of discipleship really is just to untangle that knot of our own experience so we can live into the freedom and power of our relationship with a holy Father who is not subject to the folly of earthly fathers, but also he's holy, so he's worthy of honor. We come to him with intimate, real heart prayers or questions or doubts. We don't hide them. We come to him, but we also recognize that he is high, he is lifted up. And there's this little bit of tension there where he is holy and he is Father. As we go on, we see that this prayer goes forward in what I call, so if the first section is really the personal heart of prayer, the second section of this first bit of the Lord's Prayer, which is often what it's called, the Lord's Prayer, is called the heart posture of prayer. That's right. You don't need the right physical posture to pray. You don't need to be kneeling. You don't need to, get in some downward morning sunrise pose or whatever. You just need a heart posture. Sometimes, admittedly, a physical posture can be helpful as it sets the tone for our heart. But really what we need is a heart posture for prayer. And it's articulated in verse 10 where Jesus says, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is the heart posture of prayer, to say, our Father, your kingdom come, your will be done. There's this phrase, maybe you've heard it, that's kind of familiar in office work environments called death by paper cut. And it's supposed to articulate this kind of experience where you just have all of these meetings and all of these forms and all of this stuff, and it sucks the life out of you, and you eventually die slowly through this subtle, just over litigious, rigid sense of formality in the office workplace. Well, there's another type of slow, subtle death, but it's to our spiritual life. And what I would call it'd be the death by the subtle and excusable sin of rebuilding our kingdoms on top of our conversion. I call it subtle and excusable because oftentimes it's something that just is passable for disciples. But think about this. We start with this, oftentimes, this real experience of handing our lives over to God. Sometimes it happens over long periods of time. Sometimes it's a climactic moment. But at some point in every follower of Jesus' life, they have to make a decision that their parents can't make for them. Will I follow Jesus? And again, sometimes that's over months and years, and sometimes it's climactic, one-time thing that gets reaffirmed all through their life. But one of the most threatening things to that conversion is to rebuild our own kingdom on top of our conversion. Jesus invites us to be his kingdom worker, building and working for his kingdom on top of the foundation of our conversion. To see our life as beginning again in Christ, but to see it building up and reflecting more and more of his kingdom all throughout our life. There is this sense where we have to pray, your kingdom come, not my kingdom come. Not whatever I want in a given moment. Not whatever maybe is suiting my fancy. This isn't to say that what we want isn't worth praying for, absolutely. But it's this heart posture of how am I praying? Am I praying his kingdom or am I praying my kingdom? And here's the weird thing, is that most of the time, you are in the best place to discern that for yourself and maybe a couple others, maybe a mentor and a close friend. But you have to be honest with yourself. What are you really praying for? One way to think about that is there anything in your life that if it didn't happen, you would leave your pursuit of Jesus? If there is anything in your life where it didn't happen according to your desires and your plan, and you would maybe leave your pursuit of Jesus, then it probably is something reflecting your kingdom. Jesus says, pray, your kingdom come. Father, your kingdom come. God, your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And here's the beautiful thing with that. That's actually good news. Because if we got whatever we wanted, if we got our kingdoms, it would ruin us. And many people have experienced that. They've got their own kingdoms and it has crushed them. It hasn't been something that has brought good news to them. It's brought maybe temporary relief and long-term pain. When we pray, your kingdom come, that's when the healing happens. That's when true healing happens. I love this quote by Jürgen Moltmann, the theologian. He says, Jesus' healings are not supernatural miracles in a natural world. They are the only truly natural thing in a world that is unnatural, demonized, and wounded. So when we look at the Gospels, we see Jesus healing lepers and women that have been bleeding for long periods of time. We see God, or Jesus restoring demoniacs and exorcising demons and making blind eyes seeable. When we see that, that's not just like Jesus being really powerful, though it is. It really is what it looks like for the kingdom to come, right? Because the kingdom is the reversal of everything that sin has brought onto the world. Jesus' kingdom is the healing and restoration of all that is the result of sin. So when the kingdom comes, when God's kingdom comes, that is when the healing happens. When our kingdoms come, maybe something short-term beneficial for us happens that ultimately doesn't end up being that beneficial. But when God's kingdom comes, peace happens, healing happens, restoration happens, people flourish. That's when the good stuff happens. We're trying to, I just want to say, I guess, that this is important to know. It's like this is like both this kingdom come thing. It happens on global and personal levels. So like right now, we should pray that God's kingdom would come in Ukraine, that God would have his justice and there would be justice executed and healing would happen, that there would be the needs of the Ukrainian people would be met. And like when we pray God's kingdom come, that doesn't excuse us from action, but invites us into participate in alignment with his kingdom, right? Because some of these things only God can do, but he calls us to partner with him. God's kingdom come in Ukraine. This is the oldest prayer. Maranatha is essentially praying this, the oldest prayer of the church. Maranatha, it just means come, Lord. Come in your kingdom. The issues of climate crisis, the polarization of the world, God, would your kingdom come in these areas? Would you mobilize people that love you and people that have the skill to address problems? Would you come in power in ways that are mysterious to the world? And would you come, God, would you come in your kingdom? Would your kingdom come? And then we also pray these in personal, very near ways. Families suffering, would your kingdom come? Marriages that are in crisis, would your kingdom come? God, would your healing power come to those that are suffering under the weight of mental and emotional health? God, would your kingdom come to those that can't pay their light bill? Would your kingdom come to those who are wrestling with just questions about job security? Would your kingdom come? We plead, would your kingdom come? We at Anchor want to be confident prayers of God's kingdom coming. So one of the ways we're stepping into this, and we want to keep doing it, is by just offering healing prayer nights where we just invite people that are in a place where they could use some healing, some of God's kingdom to come into their own lives. And we just invite people to receive prayer. We did this, our first one, a month or so ago, and I got an email recently that just articulates what it looks like for God's kingdom to come on a personal level. And this person said, the healing prayer night was really powerful for me. I still have a long road ahead towards healing after how traumatic the last year and a half has been, but I finally feel like the fog I've been living under is lifting. Thank you, Jesus. Because of that, over the last several weeks, I've been making steps forward towards greater wholeness, but also towards things God has spoken to me about. This is God's kingdom coming on a personal level. This is like the connection between we have a God who is near enough that sees us on this soul level. We don't have to pose for people to get their acclaim. We have a God who sees us, whether in secret or in public. And we don't have to babble on trying to hack the prayer code, thinking that maybe God might hear us if we prattle on and we use the right theological words. No, we have a God who knows what we need before we even say a word. To those that are drunk and starved on being seen and known, you have a personal God in heaven that invites us to pray, your kingdom come. And when we pray, your kingdom come, healing happens. Transformation happens, sometimes instantaneously, sometimes over a period of time, but it happens. Would you, Anchor, be a community that says, would your kingdom come? God, would your kingdom come? Would you pray confidently that God is near and that he is powerful and that his Spirit, by his Spirit, he can work powerfully in people's lives that need to see and experience his kingdom? Let's be that type of community, Anchor.